Hi, my name is Autumn Monahan, and I lead the city's communications and emergency management teams. I'm here today with Issaquah's Mayor, Mary Lou Pauly, to talk about the recent windstorm or bomb cyclone that hit Issaquah and our region, and talk a bit about our recovery efforts moving forward. Thank you so much, Mayor Pauly, for being here with me today.
Thank you, Autumn.
Yeah, to start, let's just talk about how did the city respond to this incident and this storm?
Yeah, two words I never thought I'd hear in town is bomb cyclone.
Right?
But I feel like we're entering this period of time where you have to be prepared for things that are completely unexpected like this. I thought the response was very creative and very innovative. One of my favorite things was the warming and charging stations that were set up rapidly, not knowing when the power would come back on, when homes would be heated. And these resiliency centers, as we're calling them, were allowed people to come in and get out of the cold, charge their phones, have a cup of coffee or tea, a snack. A lot of food ended up showing up, which was great. So it made people want to hang around when their houses were cold and they wanted to be around other people in the community. So it was a wonderful feeling to go in there and see during the disaster that people had a place to go to. So I can't wait to see how we're going to, make this part of our regular process of how we respond. But that was an innovation that I was really proud of. And I've shared it with many other mayors. One of our more vulnerable populations, Issaquah, has a lot of assisted care facilities. Yes. And we reached out to make sure that each of those facilities had what they needed in order to keep their residents comfortable. It's a vulnerable population. The dark, the lack of heat can be difficult. And there was one in particular where city team had to really step in and help with some efforts to make sure that they got a generator and they could connect their generator, which was great. But the big thing right out of the gate, as soon as the winds drop to a place where we don't feel like our staff would be in danger, they get out on the road and they begin to open up the roads so that different kinds of crews can begin to move around, whether it's Puget Sound Energy, our own teams, police, fire. And that is a big task. There were so many road closures from tree down during this event that it took days to open the roads. I've never seen it take that long to have things cleared. And then what do you do with it? What do you do with all that tree debris? Right. More tree debris. I mean, people did tell me it did smell a little bit like Christmas around here because there were so many pine branches everywhere. But the city set up debris collection, and in cooperation with King County, tipping fees were waived, and people were allowed to bring large loads to Tibbetts Park. There's some great video and footage about that, showing how fast they were able to clear their yards. Not everybody, though, just those that could had a place to take it. I think one of the really important things this time, too, was coordinating with the schools. That was a long outage for the schools. And, whether or not they're able to open has so many different impacts on community members' lives. How do you go to work when your children can't go to school? Mm-hmm. How do the kids go to school when there is no internet available and cell service available? So that was really challenging. And we really worked with the superintendent to see if we could help them in any way assess damage, help them with communication systems. And they volunteered the middle school at Talus for also for a resiliency center where people could go in and charge their phone. So it was a really good effort between the city and the school district. Very happy about that. One thing I'd never heard before was a windshield inspection. Is that what they call
it?
Yes. Okay. News to me. Yes. Never had heard that. This is where our teams of staff would actually drive the roads and try to identify other structures that had been damaged through it. And this was a real quick exercise just to sort of get our arms around how big of a deal, how many trees came down, how many homes were damaged, how many businesses were damaged. And, I really give a lot of credit to our public works team. While we don't provide power in town, power is provided by Puget Sound Energy, we do have to make sure that people have clean drinking water and the sewer system is still running. And, stormwater has a place to go when the rain keeps raining. And the crews just did an amazing job getting out there, looking at our infrastructure, seeing what was working, running batteries all around town all the time to keep certain signals on at certain times of the day. I mean, it was just an amazing lift and for a longer period of time than we were used to.
Yep, definitely. So why did it take longer to clear roads than usual?
Well, You know, every winter we have at least one windstorm, and people know that a power line came down. Power lines came down everywhere this time.
Yeah.
Transformers blew up. The whole transmission system was damaged. Cell phone towers in Seattle were damaged that caused impacts in Issaquah. It was just the nature of the storm was strange. The wind came from a different direction. The trees had less stability in that direction. So we've never seen so many trees come down. But when we have power come down, you cannot distinguish. A person like me who sees a down line, I can't tell if it's a live line or a hot line, or if it's no longer in service. And so our recommendation to the community is when you see the lines, stay away. Wait till Puget Sound Energy can get in there. They can assess what to do. They can prop it up over the road. They can do some temporary installation. But we are really worried about people coming in contact with live wires. And so PSC gets first dibs at it, all the cleanup, and then we come in there after and start to remove the trees.
Because it's all about the safety of our crew as well, right? And so they couldn't go in and clear those trees without the lines first being deactivated or moved, right? Yeah, because our crews also didn't know what was live or what wasn't. We heard a lot of stories of people that were driving under live power lines or trees. Not recommended.
Not recommended.
Not recommended, yes.
Yeah, I really think one thing I'd like to focus on in 2025 is more community messaging on what we should all expect when this happens. We really need to understand that there may be dangerous conditions out there that aren't that obvious. So a limb that's hanging up in a tree with the wind still around us, a live power line. We need to understand that while it is frustrating to wait, just basically the amount of damage meant the crews were stretched super thin, we have to wait. We have to be able to let people get in there and ensure that these are safe driving conditions or safe walking conditions.
Right. We actually did a video too around just safe hiking after a storm because of also all the debris in open space. Yeah. I just took a hike yesterday and still weeks later, there's a ton of debris out there. Yeah. And you really have to watch what's above you or what's coming ahead of you as crews have been clearing the trails too. So that was another element that...
It is. I'd say we're in still sort of an unnatural state. So even though you're out in the woods, there could be tree damage that you need to be looking up, you need to be looking down and assess it. I mean, we've heard before in windstorms where hikers have been harmed by things that have either fallen over or fallen from higher up. And so really want everybody to realize it's going to take many, many, many months for all areas to get looked at. And so just to be extra cautious.
One thing we heard from the community over and over again, why isn't the power back on? Why is Issaquah the last? When can power be restored? So you already mentioned the city doesn't provide power, right? So how does that work?
Yeah, the priorities for PSC are different. They not only distribute this power to houses, they have distribution and transmission infrastructure, big, large lines that were damaged. And so while we would all hope that they could come and get our neighborhood back on quick or our school on quickly, they have to begin at their transmission system. And so much of it was damaged this time that by the time they actually got into the neighborhoods and communities started to see their lights come on, it felt like a really long time. But they had so many crews spread out throughout the state, or throughout the area that had been damaged by the impact. They brought everybody in, and at one point we had one whole hotel in Issaquah that was booked out by PSC staff who were on rotating shifts to keep going with a 24/7 response for 5 to 7 days. I mean, it was an incredible lift. I get it though. It is hard when you see trucks, but not necessarily in your neighborhood, to wonder how they prioritize. But PSC was around at our resiliency centers as well to be able to explain to people what they were doing. And I've never seen them show up like that during an emergency, to be face to face with the people who are wondering why and asking questions. I thought they did a really good job being present and responsive to the community.
So power's back on, schools are open, the wind has died down, a lot of the debris has been cleared. What else is the city working on? I know there's a lot going on, but what else are we working on?
There's a lot going on. When I drive around town, I get tired because I just see one more big tree, you know, blocking a yard or chopped up next to a bridge. There's just a lot of debris that has to be removed from public land. And I would love to tell the community that while I think many community members think we have people recording everything. And we do the best we can. But they have a way to tell us where something is as well. I love the Click Fix app that's at issaquah.gov/requests. This gives us like a geographic point of where the incident is and a statement about what the nature of it is. And we need your help. We need all the eyes on the street that we can get. We probably haven't documented everything that needs to be addressed, so send it in. We love it when the community uses that app. It's so helpful.
It is. Yep. Eyes and ears, definitely.
Eyes and ears.
And it helps us in prioritizing our response. So a lot of debris also ended up in Issaquah Creek, as well as the East Fork of Issaquah Creek. And so that work will be ongoing and for many months, if not longer. Can we talk a bit about just what the initial response is and just some of the complexities people may not know about clearing debris from a creek?
It is complicated when you get into the creeks. Most of the land within cities is heavily regulated by other levels of government, not just by the city. And I'm not sure that everybody knows that. So when something falls into a regulated waterway, we have a whole bunch of other partners that we have to coordinate the work with. So we will work with the Department of Natural Resources, Department of Fish and Wildlife, local tribes. There's a lot of conversation that has to happen. There's also private property owners that we have to work with. So getting all of this debris out of the creeks is going to take some time because those conversations have to happen. The action plans have to be drawn up. But what we're monitoring for now is we recognize that as we are in the rainy season, and we will be in the rainy season for many more months, really keeping our eye on water levels and flooding. There's just a lot more material in there than there used to be. And we did even have a minor flood warning this week. People were getting sandbags again. So that's going to be a concern for me through the winter months, knowing that this work is going to take a bunch of time.
Just thinking through too, so some work actually happened today in removing some of the really large logs.
Oh.
Yes. And so the plan is that they'll be removed right after some of those discussions. There's more to come for other areas, but we're storing those logs until we can actually put
for
them
a reason
back in. So why would we be putting, it's called woody debris.
Yes,
why would we be putting woody debris back in the creek after we've removed it?
It's kind of funny because sometimes I get calls from residents going, once you finish the project, someone dumped a bunch of logs in there. And I'm like, no, that was us. We did it. We have learned over decades and decades that we have to balance what we need within our urban areas with what the natural areas need as well. And it is well known that for salmon recovery, we over the last 20, 30 years have been working on an approach where we add woody debris that falls back into a creek because that is typical in salmon spawning habitat areas. And so there are regulations that say, if a limb of a certain size fell in and could cause damage, damming and flooding, you can move it, but you have to put it back into that waterway, that watershed. You have to have a plan. And that's where that coordination with the other agencies happen. The salmon like the water to pool up, ripple, provide shade. And so that woody debris has a very, very important habitat value for the salmon. And Issaquah is about salmon. And so we have to balance out those needs that, we have to respond and continue our recovery for the storm. And we have to make sure our salmon habitat is as good as it can be.
One thing that I know you've received a lot of questions about, and I know that we also did in communications, is that you declared a state of emergency pretty early on after the bomb cyclone. What does that mean, or what does that enable you to do?
There was so much confusion over the state of emergency.
Right.
Between not just the one that I called, but why didn't the governor call a bigger one? And, I think people are more familiar now. We had a state of emergency during COVID. So recognize that they come with a certain set of criteria. You can call it when this happens. And when you call it, you can do these things that you couldn't do before. So when the city calls a state of emergency, that just allows us to purchase materials, supplies, and contract outside of our regular rules, meaning we can just pick up the phone and get somebody on site. That is not how we hire contractors in the city. But when we're in a crisis mode like that, the state of emergency allows our responding teams to be able to get what they need to do the job as fast as they can. Maybe it's a rental generator. Maybe it's a backhoe. Maybe it's chainsaws, extra chainsaws. But we can do all that with a phone call. And then we end the state of emergency as fast as we can, and we get back to documenting how we make sure that we are back within our protocols for purchasing. And that's it. That's basically what the state of emergency means in the city. But I was getting so many questions about, are you going to declare martial law? And, all these things. I'm like, oh, it's none of that. It really just lets us respond in a timely manner.
Right.
So, yeah.
So we have spent a lot of money on all of the items you were just talking about as we were getting through the purchasing and the response side of things. The city has spent millions in its response.
Yeah.
And so, another big part of our focus now is in recovery. And so what does that look like for an incident of this size here in King County?
Wow, it's fascinating. Majority of King County didn't experience this, but the swath of land that experienced the brunt of the bomb cyclone, the damage that was done in this small area of our corner of the neighborhood, it was dramatic. Mm-hmm. So I know now, as we're tallying up estimates, just to municipal local infrastructure, expenditures and damage for Issaquah is $3.8 million. That doesn't include any of the commercial property damage, the personal home damage. Mm-hmm. So the total damage to our small C community, everything in it, is a much bigger number that has yet to been even estimated. But $3.8 million in damage and recovery costs for us, that's a lot of funding. So, we've been spending a lot of time learning about what the state could do and what the federal government and FEMA can do. I know FEMA's coming in January. They're going to do an assessment, usually for FEMA to be in response mode with you, covering costs. The area and the number of structures that are damaged has to be much, much higher. So I'm glad they're coming to do an assessment. I'm not optimistic that something will come from that assessment. I know the state does have a fund for emergencies, and the code language that is written for it does not include these new words like bomb cyclone. And so for that simple reason, this type of natural event may not give us an easy pathway to access state funds either. However, the legislature is going into session. We have 6 representatives that represent our city. It was talked about last night as we had supper with our representatives that we need to find a way for the state to be nimble in that we don't know what new kinds of weather events may be happening in the next decade. And we need to make sure that the language around what that fund can be used for gets amended to make sure that just because bomb cyclone wasn't mentioned, no aid is available. So I'm still optimistic that we may be able to find a way. And while we didn't have an ask last night for our state legislatures, we're telling them we may. So we are working on that right now because we really believe that the amount of damage that was done in the community, we really want the state to come in and help, both on the private side and on the public side.
Right. So after an incident like this, I think there's a lot of lessons learned. We certainly had some at the city, but also in people's daily lives. Mm-hmm. I heard from a lot of community members, you know what, I'm finally buying a generator. You know what, I really needed more flashlights. Wow, I should have filled up my car with gas before knowing that this, storm was coming. I should have been more prepared.
Might not have a gas station for 24 hours or 48 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this is a good time to remind our community as well that they also need to be prepared in their own homes with their families. Like you had mentioned, Puget Sound Energy could take a really long time to get power back, right? And a lot of those things are out of our control. And so we also rely on the resiliency of our community to be prepared. What are some things people should be thinking about? I mentioned a few already. So fuel, right? So what else is good to have at home?
Well, I think it's a little bit like the Boy Scouts saying, there's definitely 10 essentials for you to be able to be in your home for up to 5 days without seeing or hearing or being able to communicate with your government. That is a possibility. So I would actually say the biggest part of our resiliency response is having a community that understands that knows that they may be living in a house without power or heat for up to 5 to 7 days. That means you need to have food that can be cooked outside on a barbecue or a camp stove, or food that you don't need to cook at all, and a supply of water. If there is a disruption in our water system, water will not be flowing out of your kitchen sink. And we have some really good programs in town on preparedness. I know the Citizen Emergency Response Team is where residents can sign up and learn about how they can become the the resident volunteer in the emergency, the one who's helping with sandbagging or knocking on doors to gather information. I've done that program. My husband's done it. It's a great one. I would encourage anyone to think about doing it. And in that program, you do begin to learn and understand this is exactly what I need to have in my garage or out in my shed, that I'm going to have to keep my family safe and as comfortable as we can be for up to 5 to 7 days. And as I said, that's something that I'm thinking is ripe for my attention next year to start messaging that better. It is hard to hear the stories about people not thinking that they would have to have the kind of winter coat or blanket inside their home because the inside temperature is going to be the same as the outside temperature. And so it's about staying warm, having other sources of light, being content eating cold food or cooking outside. All those things are important. But again, you also mentioned the fueling up. At some point in time in a natural disaster, as we're still in response mode, there may be an ask of the community to relocate. The conditions are not, we have so much work to do. The conditions are not going to be safe. So being able to move your family to another family member's house or something just outside of, the neighborhood that is damaged would be great. So thinking about filling up your car. And I did hear about a few people that did that, so I liked it. And I think what we learned this time too was we need to, in the age of technology, have the ability to have our community know where they can go to charge phones. After 24 to 48 hours, every device you own is dead. Everything. And so how do we, I'm not a proponent of saying everybody needs to have a generator, everybody needs to have, another way of charging batteries at their home. I think collectively on your street or within your neighborhood, knowing that there are designated spaces so that we don't have, not everybody can afford a generator. But I heard so many anecdotal stories about people with generators inviting their neighbors to come and stay over, do their schoolwork in a lighted room, all of that kind of stuff. And that's a big part of it too. So relying on those that are living in our communities and talking about how are we going to help them in an emergency? Because, that's our strength, is that our 40,000 person community is ready to stand up and do their part during the event.
Yes. As you're talking about this, one thing that I wanted to reflect on was just the challenge our communications team had in reaching residents and businesses without cell coverage. A lot did not have connectivity. Most of our typical tools, whether it's social media or our website, were not available, right, for people to access. And we relied so much on CERT volunteers who were handing out physical, we were back
paper
to printing out
flyers.
flyers, right? And they were at our grocery stores or some of the gas stations that were still open, our resiliency hubs to catch residents and provide information. And so also just that community effort in sharing information, right? And just resources was so valuable. It was just so appreciated. So
I'm kind of hoping with the summer season coming up, if we can get some information out there in spring, that this kind of stuff can show up at the neighborhood barbecues. By the way, I have a generator. I could have up to 20 of you in if you needed to work, if you needed to do stuff. That's great. But you had reminded me of another thing. We went back to phones with cords.
Yeah.
Yes. They couldn't use the cell service. There were 2 towers that were damaged in Seattle that impacted us. I could be talking to somebody 150 feet away on a cell phone and it was breaking up. I mean, our service really went down. And so I think you have to pull an old phone out of a closet that you can plug in is shocking. But, hey, you can get so much information off of that.
You can.
Phone.
Right?
Old phone.
I still have one.
I think they're all out of my house. I'm thinking I'm going to get one.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today, Mayor Pauly, and also thanks for your leadership during this incident. I know it was really appreciated by our community.
That's very sweet.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
If you are interested in learning more about the CERT program or how you and your family can be more prepared, check out our website at issaquah.gov/en. Thank you.